BookTube, this is the mid-year book freakout tag. I'm Jen and I talk about audiobooks, and this is a tag. I haven't done a tag in a little while, not a long time, but a little while. And I like this one because it kind of gives you the chance to evaluate what you've read for the first part of the year and what you want to read for the second part of the year. So the original creator of the tag is linked below, and so you may want to go and check that out. And in the meantime, I'm just going to get right into these questions. Number one is the best book that you've read so far in 2018. Well, I went back through to pick, and I came up with all my 5-star books, and I thought, I can't even begin to choose one of these. It was just too hard. So let me tell you what my 5-star books were up to this point. First up, A Reaper at the Gates, which is book 3 in the Ember and the Ashes series by Sabaa Tahir, narrated by Steve West, Fiona Hardingham, Katherine, McEwan, and Maxwell Caulfield. The Book of M by Peng Shepherd, narrated by James Fouhey and Emily Zeller. Far from the Tree by Robin Benway is narrated by Julia Whelan. From Lukov with Love was actually a 4.5-star book that I rounded up by Mariana Zapata, narrated by Callie, Dalton, and Teddy Hamilton. The Fates Divide is the sequel to Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth, narrated by Butler, Emily Rankin, Erin Spencer, and MacLeod Andrews. The 14 by Peter Clines is narrated by Ray Porter. Oh, brilliant. The Shape of Water by Guillermo del Toro and Daniel Kraus was narrated by my favorite, Jenna Lumia. Genome, which is book 2 of the Extinction Files by A.G. Riddle, was narrated by Eduardo Ballerini. This Adventure Ends is by Emma Mills, read it in print. The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill is narrated by Christina Moore. Endurance, A Year in Space, A Lifetime of Adventure is by Scott Kelly, the astronaut who spent a year in space, and it is narrated by the author. It's really good. Obsidio, which is book 3 in the Illuminae series by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, was narrated by a slew of people, but the main characters, I will tell you, were narrated by Olivia Taylor-Dudley, Jonathan McLean, Lincoln Hopp, MacLeod Andrews, Erin Spencer, Lisa Cordileone, Carla Corvo, and Andrew Iden. That Baby is by Jillian Dodd, and it's book 3 in the That Boy series. It's narrated by Lisa Cordileone. Thunderhead is book 2 in the Scythe series by Neil Schusterman, and it's narrated on audio by Greg Tremblay. Suffer Love by Ashley Herring Blake was a book I read in print. A Man Called Uva by Frederick Bachman is narrated by George Newbern. And then Artemis by Andy Weir is narrated on audio by Rosario Dawson. Okay, so those are the 5-star books. When you ask me, what's your favorite book? Those. That's the best I can do. Question 2, the best sequel, Thunderhead by Neil Schusterman. Again, book 2 in the Scythe series, narrated by Greg Tremblay. Man, what an ending. Talk about a cliffhanger. Man, I can't wait for that 3rd book. And if you haven't checked out that series, please do. Neil Schusterman has just such a great way of taking all kinds of issues and flipping them on their heads and telling a story that is just engaging and fascinating and thought-provoking and entertaining. Number 3, a new release you want to read. That would be Nyxia Unleashed, which is book 2 in the Nyxia Triad by Scott Rankin. It's narrated by Sullivan Jones, Alex Romashov, and Carol Monda. Haven't picked that up yet. It's kind of right like the next book that I'm going to read after the one I finished that I'm currently reading. And I loved Nyxia. This is YA sci-fi, really, really good. Really suspenseful, really great characters, and I just really liked it. Most anticipated release, Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. It doesn't have a narrator on audio yet listed on Audible, but I have a feeling it's going to be Steve West because he did Strange the Dreamer, which is book 1 in that series. I think that's just a duology, I'm not sure, but comes out October 2nd. Dry by Neil Shusterman is narrated by a full cast, that's all it says, and it also comes out the 2nd of October, and that one is post-apocalyptic YA. I love that. Someday by David Levithan is book 3 in his Everyday series, narrated by Alex McKenna, Kathleen McKierney, and a full cast, it says. So I don't have a release date on that, but that is going to be amazing. Every Day is one of my top favorite books of all time. Such a great story about a being called A who inhabits a different body every day. And so this is going to carry the story a little further. And I think that's wonderful. That's a movie too. Every Day is a movie, and I haven't seen it yet, but I can't wait until I do. Number 5 is Your Biggest Disappointment. For me, that was basically the author Taylor Jenkins Reid. I thought I was gonna love her books, and I just, they were not for me. I read 2. The first one was After I Do. It was narrated by Tara Sands, and it had to do with a couple that separate for a year to repair their marriage, and it looks at marriage from all kinds of ways. And I gave it 3.25 stars, rounded it down to 3. And I just didn't like it. I didn't like the way she handled their situation. And then I picked up One True Loves, and that's narrated by Julia Whelan. Again, fantastic narrator, and yet I gave it 2 stars. And that one's about a woman whose husband dies in a helicopter accident, and she mourns him and for a long time. And then she gets engaged to another guy, and then her husband apparently didn't die after all, and he comes back, and it's how they handle that. I didn't like that at all. I didn't like the way it was handled. I didn't like the attitudes of the main characters, and so, you know, it's just personal preference. I just didn't like it. So she was a huge disappointment. I really did. One True Loves, I thought I'll give this a chance after I do, and didn't work. Number 6 is The Biggest Surprise. That would be Far From the Tree by Robin Benway, narrated again by Julia Whelan, who has become one of my favorite narrators, I have to say. Her lower range male characters I'm not a huge fan of, but you get so wrapped up in the story with her narration that it just doesn't matter. So Far From the Tree, YA contemporary. Oh my gosh, why did I wait so long to read this book? It was so good. And I think I waited because Robin Benway also wrote Emmy and Oliver, and that was a book I read last year. And I wasn't bowled over by it. I didn't hate it or anything, but I just didn't love it. But this one, oh my gosh, so good. It's about 3 kids who are related, but who one goes through the foster care system, and 2 of the others are adopted, and then they find out about each other and they go in search of their birth mother. It's really good. Number 7 is my favorite new author, Peng Shepherd, with the Book of M. That's narrated by James Fouhey and Emily Wu Zeller. Oh my gosh, it's a debut, and it's adult, post-apocalyptic, and holy cow, this woman can write. I'm telling you what, I got to the almost to the end, and there's a plot twist, and I cried. I don't cry at anything, and I cried. It was so moving. I mean, it makes me want to cry to think about it, just how heart-wrenching it was. Don't get me wrong, it's a very satisfying ending, and you know me, I have to have a happy ending, so I was okay with it. But boy, this woman can write. I want everything she writes from here on out, because it was amazing. And James Fouhey and Emily Wu Zeller were also amazing with the narration. I just, wow. My favorite new narrator is Edoardo Ballerini, and he wrote Genome, which is book 2 of the Extinction Files by A.G. Riddle. I'd never heard him before, and I was really impressed. I really liked him. Now, it's been a while since I listened to that, but I do remember thinking, this guy is really good. How is it that I've not run across this narrator before? Thank goodness I have. Now I know he's going to be fantastic the next time I hear him. Number 9 is a book that made you cry, The Book of M. Yeah, it just took my heart out and ran over it and stabbed it and then put it back in my chest. Oh man, it was so good. And number 10, a book that made you happy. That would be Obsidio by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. And of course, you know, I'm always telling you the narrators, and I think I told you earlier, that book, the characters in it are what make it so amazing. It's just so entertaining and suspenseful and funny, and you know, great ending. I was sorry to see the end with all these characters, and you know, it was the perfect ending, and it just made me happy. You know, I got to the end and I thought, this makes me happy. So those are all the questions. There actually are more questions than that, but I've just kind of skipped some because I just didn't want to address them. They don't really apply to the kinds of books that I read. But one of the last bonus questions is things I want to read by the end of the year 2018. So I have a bunch to tell you about, and these are all recommendations for you. First of all, I want to reread the Darkest Minds trilogy by Alexandra Bracken, and that's narrated by Amy McFadden. That has a group of characters in it that I absolutely fell in love with, and the story's good. It's YA, sci-fi, post-apocalyptic, and it's okay, but the characters are what make that trilogy amazing. There's also a new book, book 4 in the series. It's called The Darkest Legacy, and that's going to come out pretty soon. And I want to read that with Lisa, my good friend, because she hasn't read it before. And so I think, oh, this is great. I'm going to get her to experience it all over again, because it's been probably 3 or 4 years since I read it. I hope I like it as much a second time. Good Luck With That is by Kristen Higgins, narrated by Exie Sands, Lori Gardner, and Susie Jackson. I love Kristen Higgins. She's one of my favorite romance, women's fiction kind of writers, and so really looking forward to that one. All Your Perfects is by Colleen Hoover, narrated by Madeline Mabey. That I think is coming out in July. Stay tuned to the channel because some things are in the works with regard to that particular book, so I'll keep you posted. But I'm a Colleen Hoover fan. I haven't liked probably the last 3 or 4 books that she's done, but I am always optimistic because she's done so many good ones. Again, adult romance. Rainy Day Friends is out by Jill Shalvis, narrated by Karen White, and I haven't read it yet, and I love Jill Shalvis, so can't wait to get to that one. Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik is narrated by Lisa Flanagan, and that's a different take on Rumpelstiltskin, I think, and it just sounds so good. I really loved Uprooted, which was adult fantasy, and this is a bit of the same kind of fairy tale retelling, so yeah, looking forward to that one because whew, Uprooted just was so good. The Darkest Corners is a book I've had on my shelf for a long time. It's by Kara Thomas, and it's narrated by Georgina Marie. I love Georgina Marie, and this is kind of YA suspense thriller kind of, I think. And it was written a while ago, and like I say, I've had it on my shelves for forever, and I've even been told, you need to read this book, and I've just never gotten around to it, so I really want to read that by the end of the year. The Chaos of Standing Still is by Jessica Brody, narrated by Amy McFadden, love her, and this is YA contemporary. It just looks really good. Effective Needs is by Rebecca Taylor, and there is no audio. What the heck? Oh, so I'm going to have to read that in print, but I think it will be really, really worth it. It has to do with autism, the autism spectrum, and it's YA contemporary, so kids in high school, and I'm always just so interested in those kinds of characters. They just fascinate me, and I grow to love them. Judging Books is by Shay Savage. It's about a woman in her 20s who falls in love with a younger man who has brain damage. I love Shay Savage. I love Shay Savage. She wrote Transcendence, which is one of my favorite books of all time. Her books are generally not on audio, so I'll have to read them in print. Totally worth doing. And then lastly, the final 6 is by Alexandra Monier, narrated by the author and James Fouhey. And my friend Karen gave that one 5 stars, and so I know it's going to be amazing. It's YA sci-fi set in space. Can't get enough of that lately. I've just really been getting my fill since the Chick Lit-a-thon in the month of May. So Anyway, that's the tag. I'm not going to tag anybody because everybody does this tag, and it's kind of like a free-for-all. You know, if you want to do it, you should. And of course, you know, if you've read any of these books, or if any of these favorites were the same favorites I have, then please let me know. I always want to hear your thoughts in comments. So let's talk about stuff there. And that's it for now from me. I will see you next time. Thanks so much for watching.